local races that are going on. And I checked out the NevadaGlobe.com, that publication, and the editor of the Nevada Globe joining us right now on the line. She is Reagan Babe on social media, on Twitter, and her name is Megan Barth, and she is nice enough to be joining us today. Megan, I do appreciate you coming on. How are you?
Absolutely. Well, happy Monday. I'm doing very well. How are you doing?
Doing okay. I appreciate you coming on. I want you to give people to start a little bit of background on the Nevada Globe, right? It is a independent publication, right? Is that fair to say? Tell me a little bit about when you started this thing.
Very much so, very fair. We started about a year ago. I think it was around this time in October that the website launched. It's the NevadaGlobe.com. Mm-hmm. And I have been the founding editor since its beginning. And we cover policy and politics throughout the state. That's pretty much my role of covering candidates, obviously, during this heated midterm election cycle.
Yep.
And all the policy coming out of Carson City. So I will be at the legislative body when they reconvene in February.
Gotcha. Okay, so would you consider, just so I have a little background on you, would you consider yourself a conservative Republican, or what would you call yourself?
Well, I'm pretty independent, pretty independently minded. I have been, just since an infant, one that always challenges authority and asks a slew of questions. If you went back to my grade school teachers, I was probably known as a student that was constantly asking why and asking a variety of questions. And I think that's really what led me to my degree in English, and then that's led me along to become a reporter, a journalist, and I've covered politics for over 10 years now in Orange County, California, and then I fled California about 7 years ago, found Las Vegas, and have lived in Nevada since.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you for that background. So I am a registered independent. I've only voted for one Democrat in my life. Full disclosure, it was Joe Biden, which I don't regret because it was more of an anti-Donald Trump vote. I lean to the left certainly on social issues, but I am for capital punishment. I am for border security, and I vote for Republicans. I vote for Democrats. So that's a quick rundown on me and my feelings. All right, let's start with Nevada. There's a lot of people that are attacking Democrats for using abortion as an issue in this state. I certainly believe it's an issue, even though there was a referendum in 1990, not in our Constitution, but as you know, referendum 1990, where the voters are the only people that can decide to overturn that. With that being said, can you understand why there are women all over the country, including women here in Nevada, that are scared, they're worried?
No, I really don't understand why they are worried. Abortion is legal. There's no national ban coming. There might be a few Republicans that have proposed it, like Lindsey Graham, I believe, has proposed it, but they certainly don't have the votes in the congressional body to pass that through, even if the Republicans gain a majority in the Senate. We have Adam Laxalt on record saying that he would not vote for a national ban. We have April Becker on record, if she beats Susie Lee, saying she would not vote for a national ban. And then when you look into Nevada, I find that the abortion rhetoric is really not trending well, or at least polling well, with a majority of voters. I think the Democrat Party would be better off talking about the economy, especially when you look at really every poll. I mean, every poll shows that the top three concerns of voters of all demographics and voting styles are concerned about inflation, they are concerned about the economy, and they are concerned about jobs. When you look at the Latinos, for example, that are polled, only 8% of Latinos believe that abortion is an urgent issue. And so I don't understand necessarily. I understand it from a political standpoint. The politics of fear plays very well into fundraising. It also tugs at the heartstrings, obviously, of women specifically. But even women that are polled, abortion does not make the top three concerns, as women are generally the managers or the financial managers of the household, whether it's their own household or their family's household. And so the economy is, obviously we're in a recession when we look at the numbers, when we look at gas prices, when we look at food prices, for example, that have spiked the highest 13.1% since 1979. These are the issues that are affecting families, women, Hispanics or Latinos.
Sure.
And across all demographics.
Sure. I agree with you that the economy is an important issue. Inflation's an important issue. I guess where we might disagree is I do believe abortion is a big issue as well. As you know, there are some states, not Nevada, and I know that's what you cover, but there are some states in this country where if you're a 10 or an 11-year-old girl and you get sadly raped or the victim of incest, you have to go to another state to get an abortion. I find that repugnant and disgusting. I'm glad that won't happen in Nevada, but I do find it an issue when people in other states, sadly, women that want to get an abortion are going to have to come to the state of Nevada. I think that's an issue. And while you're right, and we agree that it's not going to be overturned here, I think it's also important to find out the character in people and the positions of people. And, Mark Robertson comes in studio. He's another one a few weeks ago who thinks if he had it his way, abortion would be illegal everywhere. So I do think it's an issue, but I also agree with you that the economy, gas prices, food prices, those are all important issues as well. All right, so let me ask you a little bit about some of the people that are running here in Nevada, because this is what you do, this is what you cover. You mentioned Adam Laxalt. I'll mention Jim Marchant, Sigal Chattah. These are all people that, I use the term election denier, and I know a lot of Republicans don't like that, but it's true. These are all people that still say that Donald Trump won the 2020 election. If I told you that the earth was flat, you probably wouldn't want to vote for me. To me, it's the same thing. Why is it that they're still saying that Donald Trump won the 2020 election, right? We can talk about how we want elections to be more secure. I think that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. But why are they all lying? Because it's a lie, isn't it? Am I wrong in saying that?
I don't know necessarily that you're wrong or right in saying that, but I would ask, do you call Stacey Abrams an election denier?
Well, isn't that whataboutism? And last I checked, Stacey Abrams didn't cause an insurrection.
No, not necessarily. I don't think it's a whataboutism. What I think is that Stacey Abrams also denied that she lost the election to Kemp in Georgia. And as a journalist and someone in the press, I look at headlines.
Yep.
I create headlines. And what I've noticed is that the headlines of the past never said election, or of current, never said that Stacey Abrams, the election denier, is running for governor again. And that's what we have when we look at the headlines for Jim Marchant or Adam Laxalt.
Sure. I think there's a reason for that. Let's dissect that. Listen, if Stacey...
I would love to know it.
Yeah, let's do it. So Stacey Abrams, if she said that there was fraud and that she won the election and there was no proof to back that up, then that's wrong. But what I would say is that when you have a former president who incited an insurrection, and the reason why I say incite, and I don't know if you agree or not, Megan, but if Donald Trump didn't say for months that the election was stolen and that he won in a landslide, people's lives would have been lost that day. Now, Stacey Abrams, you might be right on that. She could have been very wrong in denying her election. But she didn't cause an insurrection. She didn't cause violence. And I don't hear her talking about today how she lost the election, but she actually won it. To this day, Donald Trump, every single day, still says he won the election in a landslide. That's the difference, I think. I think there's a big distinction.
Well, I think that, unfortunately, the election of 2020 was shrouded in quite a bit of mystery. And what I mean by that is that, I've been watching elections since, I can remember. And I never saw the counting of ballots stop on election night. That was the first time I've ever seen multiple states, specifically in swing states, where they stopped counting ballots. State laws were changed throughout the country, specifically in swing states, through non-elected, electoral officials. And those were changed under the pressure applied through legal action, specifically by the Democrat Party and under the guise of COVID. And so I think if the Democrats necessarily did not take extraordinary action, specifically during COVID, to change election laws in swing states and stop counting ballots, and then deny the observers the opportunity to watch the continued counting of ballots, I think there would be less questions. Look, I have been an election hawk, specifically a champion, I would say, and a researcher and an investigator of voter rolls and election integrity. I've been stumping for election integrity for at least 10 years. I've worked with a variety of organizations around the country to ensure that voter rolls are clean, that the election is a transparent process, that elections are free and fair. And I think that a lot of those issues that I just spoke of were not transparent, specifically under the guise of COVID. And when our election laws are changed by the legislature to completely upend our whole entire electoral system in Nevada and go to mail-in ballots, et cetera, it causes people concern. And they have the right to question the election.
So here's where we disagree. I think there's a difference between questioning something and then saying you won in a landslide and the Democrats cheated. To this point, there has been no evidence of widespread voter fraud. Zero. You can have an issue with, votes being stopped being counted. It was during a global pandemic. I think it's okay to ask questions. I don't have a problem with that at all. But what I have a problem with is Donald Trump and many Republicans out there lying, saying that the election was stolen, that the Democrats cheated, that Joe Biden is not a free and fair elected president. Do you understand the distinction between asking questions? Okay, Kari Lake is not asking questions. Donald Trump won the 2020 election. The Democrats cheated. I just think there's a fine line between asking questions and then attacking our democracy. I believe Donald Trump has attacked our democracy, and I believe the Adam Laxalts in the world attack our democracy every day, campaigning on lies.
Well, and you're obviously, you have that opinion, and that's your opinion. And the only thing that I would challenge that is when you say there's no evidence of widespread voter fraud. Mm-hmm. I find the injection of widespread to be kind of a new term, right? Of widespread. Before it was, and I was told by the president or the chairman of the Democrat Party at one point. Years ago, that there was not a scintilla of evidence of voter fraud. And then all of a sudden it's now, there's not widespread voter fraud.
Well,
what is it?
Well, I think what it is
the only other thing I would add
Sure.
to that is that when Adam Laxalt was working with, I think it was Richard Grenell and others within the Trump organization to challenge the election results in Nevada, for example. Mm-hmm. I personally witnessed, I think they had 12 binders of evidence, and not anecdotal evidence, but binders of evidence, which the judge that was presiding over the case, or the slate of judges that were presiding over the case, never looked at. Mm-hmm. And so I think, when you have 12 binders of evidence, it should take a little bit longer than a week to decide, but I understand that judges necessarily don't want to get involved in overturning elections. Mm-hmm. And so, when you say there's absolutely no evidence, I would push back and say, look, there were 12 binders of evidence that were never looked at by the judges.
So I have no idea what was in those 12 binders. I mean, we can put no idea. I honestly saw the binders and saw the summary of the binders. Okay.
And it was very compelling. I was in the room when all of this stuff was going on.
So let me ask you another question. And by the way, if you're joining us, she is Megan Barth. She is the editor of the Nevada Globe. Do you believe that Joe Biden was a free and fair elected president?
Do I believe it? Sure. That's what we have. Joe Biden is our president. He's been our president for 2 years. And, he said the other day that the economy is doing great. Well, I would challenge that assertion, obviously. Mm-hmm. And we have 2 more years of Joe Biden. And what's wonderful about our country is that we have elections. And for those that don't like Joe Biden, can vote him out. And for those that love Donald Trump, if he runs again, can vote him in. And that's why I think what's interesting, too, is that Democrats are so focused on something that happened 2 years ago, when in another 2 years they'll have a chance to either reelect Joe Biden or elect somebody else on the Democrat ticket should Joe Biden not run. Mm-hmm. But what happened 2 years ago is certainly not in the polls. I mean, no one's looking back at 2 years ago and talking about something that happened 2 years ago.
Kari Lake is. Adam Laxalt is. Aren't a lot of these Republicans that are running for office on campaign rallies always talking about 2020? I mean, I would have to disagree with you on that. Kari Lake talks about it every day. She talks about election fraud, and Donald Trump is the face of the Republican Party. He talks about it every day. Sam Peters is another one. Sigal Chatt is another one. I mean, I'm just going by the quotes and the things they say on the campaign trail. They're the ones who bring up fraud, aren't they?
Well, I've been covering all of those candidates with the exception of Kari Lake and Donald Trump because I cover Nevada politics. But I watched the debate between Sam Peters and Stephen Horsford, and Sam Peters said that Joe Biden was elected, although when asked about what Democrats are going to do to bring down inflation, Stephen Horsford really did not have an answer for that outside of the Inflation Reduction Act. And then he pivoted to January 6th.
So we can talk about that. I'm happy to talk with you about that.
The deflection was very interesting to hear and to witness, because right now the voters' concerns are about inflation, gas prices, food prices, the economy, and how Nevada is going to come out of a near 2-year shutdown. You know, I often, and I have a lot of friends, quite frankly, that are in the hospitality industry. They are bartenders, most of them. Some of them are dealers. And they are struggling. They are hurting because the convention business in Vegas has not come back. And so, you know, what voters' concerns are right now as we look towards November 8th and beyond is, you know, what are the Democrats? We're in a democratically controlled state here in the Silver State. What are they going to do to get our economy back on track? And so people can afford. I mean, I moved here 7 years ago because Vegas and Nevada at large was a very affordable place to live. Now we are really mimicking some of the same policies coming out of the Carson City legislature that California has done. And when I speak to Nevadans, most Nevadans don't want to be California. We want nothing to do with California. The only thing that we have in common with California is a border.
So let me ask you. Let me ask you about that, because you mentioned a lot of things there. Let's try to go through them one by one. Let's start with gas prices. So as you know, gas prices are up almost all over the world. So why is that Joe Biden's problem? Why are Democrats at fault when there are countries run by Republicans, quite frankly, where gas prices are higher than they are in this country? Why do I always hear from the right it's Joe Biden's fault, it's his problem when it comes to gas prices? Yet when gas prices were so high under the George W. Bush administration, I didn't hear these Republicans saying that it was George W. Bush's fault. I guess that's my question. Why is it all Joe Biden's fault when we know that inflation and gas prices, for the most part, are up throughout the world?
Well, I think when you look at Joe Biden's energy policies, for example, he has basically eliminated new leasing on oil production and exploration. He eliminated the pipeline that was running from Canada through North Dakota to the south into the United States. You know, they are very anti-fossil fuel, and America is abundant in fossil fuels. We rival the Saudi kingdom as far as what we could produce in oil. Now, what I often hear is that fossil fuels are dirty. They're a detriment to the environment, et cetera. Well, when you look at solar panels, I mean, or solar vehicles, electric vehicles, for example, where do you think that electricity comes from? Well, it comes from coal. And so, you know, everyone might think they're doing their part by plugging in an electric vehicle. But where is that electricity coming from? Then we look at solar panels, and I wrote about solar panels, for example. We are Steve Sisolak often touts that, you know, we are leading in the solar revolution, for example. Well, solar panels require, and solar farms in particular, like the one in Boulder City, require enormous amount of water. And let me put that in perspective for you. The solar farm that was being built in Boulder City used 20 million gallons of water in 2 months in its construction. 20 million gallons in just 2 months. So if we want to talk about water issues in Nevada, we also have to look at and look over to solar and say, well, how is solar using water, and how much water, and where is this water coming from? And so, you know, there's always a trade-off when it comes to clean, quote-unquote, clean energy. Then when you look at EVs, and we go back to electric vehicles, well, that requires lithium batteries. Lithium batteries require oil. Lithium batteries require mining. We now have a huge fight up in northern Nevada over a lithium mine. We have conservationists and environmentalists and tribal communities that are against opening up and excavating a lithium mine.
I'm not a fan of electric cars either. My only point is I don't think Joe Biden and the Democrats are the only reason why gas prices are high throughout the world. I think Republicans and Democrats need to work together to come up with solutions instead of bickering and saying, well, Joe Biden's responsible for the gas prices and it's the Democrats' fault. That's my only point on that. But I want to move on to defund the police. I've heard you make statements before where you say Democrats want to defund the police. I don't want to misquote you, but I think I heard you on another show last week say that. Can you name me one prominent Democrat in the state of Nevada that wants to defund the police?
Well, I think what we've seen from Democrats like Catherine Cortez Masto, Chick Seeger-Bloom, and others, Stephen Horsford, Dina Titus, is that they fully accept the endorsement of NARAL. Now, NARAL is known more for reproductive rights when it comes to women, or perhaps, I guess, men that identify as women who now I'm told can also have periods and produce babies. But nonetheless, they are endorsed by NARAL. NARAL specifically said in April of 2021 that it was beyond time to defund the police.
Okay, but that's not that's not their opinion. That's the opinion of somebody that endorsed them. For example, Proud Boy members endorsed Donald Trump. Does that mean Donald Trump is a white supremacist? I mean, I'm just asking you a specific question with all due respect. You said that Democrats want to defund the police, and I'm asking you, the leaders of the Democratic Party in the state of Nevada, can you name me just one that wants to defund the police? Sisolak doesn't want to defund the police. Joe Biden doesn't want to defund the police. I suppose you can find a couple mayors out there that are morons that want to defund the police. All I'm saying is when you make a statement that Democrats, quote, want to defund the police, I don't think you're being intellectually honest. That's just my personal opinion, unless you can name me some. Maybe I'm unaware. Can you name me some Democrats that are prominent politicians in Las Vegas or in the entire state of Nevada or even the country that have voted to defund the police?
Well, and I do believe you're misquoting me because I don't think I've ever came out and said that Catherine Cortez Masto or Steve Sisolak wants to defund the police.
No, you said Democrats. You said Democrats. Democrats want to defund. Yeah.
What I have outlined specifically in Nevada is their endorsements and money they have received from anti-police, defund the police groups. When you look across perhaps the country and Democrats across the country, like Cori Bush, I believe her name is, out of Missouri, she has called for defunding the police. Yeah. So has Ilhan Omar. I believe that Ocasio-Cortez also has made some statements about defunding the police. And this was specifically in the wake of George Floyd's death. There was a big defund the police movement. By also embracing the Black Lives Matter movement and their rhetoric, which calls for defunding the police, it's hard to disassociate yourself when you associate yourself with these anti-police, defund the police groups, and you accept money from these groups. So that was really my whole statement, I believe, that I had made with the receipts to back it up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Ocasio-Cortez is not for defunding the police. She was for reallocating funds from one precinct to another. But well, you disagree with that?
Okay.
Is that wrong?
Well, reallocation, reimagining, defunding. They all kind of have the same connotation.
So you think reallocating funds from one police precinct to another for better training is the same thing as defunding the police? Is that what you're saying?
Reallocating funds to, for example, I remember hearing about social workers. So specifically on domestic issues, they wanted to send social workers. Well, I think it was just a couple days ago that two police showed up at a domestic violence call, and they were both murdered by a man with a long gun. So I don't think social workers really want to put themselves in the way of a domestic violence situation, because domestic violence situations, according to my friends who are LEOs, are sometimes the most volatile and the most dangerous because they don't necessarily know what they're walking into.
I agree. I agree with you 150%.
This reallocation language or the reimagining language all comes from defunding something and then moving it into somewhere else. And whether that's social work or whether it's, for example, now we have a care group, I think, in Las Vegas that's going around and trying to clean up or assess the violence that's happening around the Strip. We just had, that mass stabbing by an illegal alien from Guatemala that occurred, and he killed 2 people, injured, I think, 8. And the Clark County's response to that was to send out care groups. Now, I don't know if that care group was part of this reimagining the police or the reallocation of funds. I'm certainly just not, I haven't looked into it. But with that type of language, And the anti-police rhetoric specifically coming out of a lot of these democratically aligned groups or Democrat-aligned groups have impacted our police forces across the country and in Nevada.
All I can say is I am pro-police. I am also pro-Black Lives Matter. And while, because you had mentioned that, while there are a group of people that have taken advantage of the Black Lives Matter movement, I think there were, I would hope you would agree with me on this, tens of millions of people within the Black Lives Matter movement that just want equality. And I was one of them. And I'm not sure, I don't know. I just hear, I'll give you an example, and you can tell me whether you disagree. I hear a lot from Republicans on January 6th. The overwhelming majority of those people were not criminals. They were good people. Guess what? I might disagree with their politics, but I agree. There were about 700 criminals that day, 100,000 people that just wanted to hear the president speak. I just don't hear the same from Republicans when it comes to Black Lives Matter. There were tens of millions of people that protested peacefully. Were there some bad people out there that attacked police and lit things on fire? Absolutely. And no decent human being would condone that sort of behavior. Would you agree with me that the overwhelming majority of protesters at Black Lives Matter protests were not criminals? And the majority of people that were there on January 6th just wanted to hear the president speak, and they weren't criminals either. Can we agree on that?
I think we can agree on that to a certain extent. And where I would disagree with you is that the founders of Black Lives Matter are on the record in multiple interviews saying that they are trained Marxists.
Right, the founders. We're talking about 10 or 15. Absolutely. We're talking about 10 or 15 people, like I just mentioned. I agree with you. But I'm talking about the tens of millions of people that protested.
And it's easy to get swept up into a movement like Black Lives Matter. However, the Black Lives Matter protests resulted in $3 billion of damage to our economy. Mm-hmm. When watching those quote-unquote protests, which evolved into riots, we had multiple people killed, like Officer David Dorn. Mm-hmm. And what we were told by the mainstream media, and this is my problem with the mainstream media, and this is one of the challenges of being a journalist, is that we were told they were mostly peaceful protests. Well, mostly peaceful protests do not evolve into $2 or $3 billion of damage. You looked at Minneapolis, I believe it was. It was literally burnt to the ground. And where most of this damage occurred, where Black people had their businesses and where they lived their lives. So Black people were actually more damaged by the Black Lives Matter riot, not protests, riots, mm-hmm. than, say, white suburbia.
Would you characterize January 6th as a riot as well?
It evolved into a riot, absolutely. Mm-hmm. And I believe that there were multiple bad actors within that movement that caused the destruction. Now, what I find interesting about January 6th is that Nancy Pelosi did not have the staff or did not agree to have an increase in Capitol Police presence, yet she found time to have her daughter show up at the Capitol with a film crew.
I'm just okay. So I'm trying to understand because I heard what you said about Black Lives Matter. When I bring up January 6th, the first person you want to hold to account is Nancy Pelosi. Is that what I'm hearing?
Absolutely.
So nothing about Donald. Hold on. Let me get this right. The January 6th insurrection. The January 6th insurrection that was clearly incited by Donald Trump and many of his supporters. And the first person on your list that you want to hold to account when it comes to the insurrection, again, I'm asking you this question again because I'm mesmerized by your answer, is Nancy Pelosi? You don't want to talk about the white supremacists and the Trump supporters and all the rhetoric. You talk about rhetoric being put forth by Donald Trump about the election. You want to blame Nancy Pelosi for what took place for January 6th? Am I getting you right?
Well, what I heard from Donald Trump is that he was asking people to march or walk peacefully to the Capitol. He did not say, make sure you break the windows, break through the doors, and partake in violence. But what I do know is that Donald Trump, prior to the January 6th rally, which descended into violence, was he requested additional security.
It took him he didn't do anything for 5 hours.
I'm not done.
But what you're saying is not true. It took him 5 hours to do anything.
It is absolutely true what I'm telling you. He asked for an increase in Capitol Police presence. He asked the Mayor Bowser for the National Guard Both Mayor Bowser and Nancy Pelosi, who is in charge of the Capitol Police, denied his request.
Let me ask you a question then. He might have asked for more security before the insurrection, but when the insurrection actually happened, what did Donald Trump do for the next 4.5 hours?
I honestly don't know.
Okay, I think maybe you don't know because the answer is nothing. That is proven. For 4.5 hours, Donald Trump did absolutely nothing. He sat on his ass watching it on television, and the first person you want to complain about, I'm sorry, we just have a disagreement, is Nancy Pelosi? With all due respect, that's ridiculous.
When he was denied the request to have additional police presence at the Capitol, as well as in the city from the National Guard, I'm not sure what he was supposed to do. However, what I am concerned about were the videos, and multiple of them coming out. And I used to call on the Capitol, just to let you know. I have been in the basement of the Capitol. I have been in secret meetings of the Capitol. I called on the Capitol for years.
Okay.
I could not enter the Capitol without being wanded. I could not enter the Capitol without being searched, all of my bags, etc.
Right.
Personally, I witnessed through videos police opening up the gates and opening up the doors to allow people into the Capitol.
So there were several. I'll tell you. I think I can answer that.
Capitol Police open the doors and allow people into the Capitol.
I think I can answer that.
People like with horns on their head and backpacks. And
yeah.
masks.
Well, as you know,
I couldn't walk into the Capitol with a backpack on.
Yeah, but you were one person. I think there's a difference between that and 100 people per one officer. The only other option that they would have had, because they were, as you know, they were breaking down gates and windows and all that stuff, would have been to take out a gun and start shooting people. And I don't think anybody wanted that to happen. But we do know that 140 officers.
Or have an increase in police presence. If they had increased police presence in and around the Capitol, as requested by the President of the United States, they would not have been overrun by some bad actors.
So
why did they open the gates? Why did they open the doors? There was no reason to open the doors or the gates. If they had the manpower at the Capitol, which was requested by the President of the United States, perhaps January 6th would not have descended into the chaos that it did. That's all I'm saying.
Right. And all I'm saying is if Donald Trump didn't spread a lie for months before January 6th and didn't say that he won the election in a landslide, maybe January 6th doesn't happen either. Have you ever asked yourself that question?
No, I've never asked myself that question.
Why not?
Because personally, a president has the right, and as anyone does, to challenge the results of the election.
Challenging an election.
You want to call it a lie, you can call it a lie.
Challenging an election and saying that you won.
A lie.
So when Donald Trump today says he won the. Okay, my head is spinning now. When Donald Trump today says that he won the election in a landslide and the Democrats cheated, to this day, you're telling me you don't think that's a lie.
That's what he believes.
I didn't ask you if that's what he believes. And by the way, we're learning evidence now that Mark Meadows said that that's not what he believes. But that's here or nor there. Just because you believe something doesn't mean you should say it and doesn't mean it's true. So you believe.
Why can't you say that he believes something?
Well, so you don't think Donald Trump's a liar then? You think he's honest and he's telling the truth?
I don't necessarily think he's a liar. I think that's what he believes. I find it very interesting that the last 5 minutes you want to talk about January 6th when we have a midterm election 23 days from now.
Yeah, because we
this is the problem.
Because we have
the problem.
I agree.
You are so hung up. You and others are so hung up on what happened 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And it doesn't even poll. This is not.
Who are you polling? What do you mean?
Issue.
What do you mean it doesn't
you look
poll?
At Rasmussen. You look at Rasmussen. You look at Quinnipiac. You look at Emerson.
This isn't. You don't think this is serious? You don't think this is? We've never had an overthrow of our democracy and people screaming out, "Hang Mike Pence." This is a huge issue. I'm shocked that you don't think this is an issue that anybody should talk about.
It's such a huge issue that a congressional committee has convened a televised hearing now for the last 6 weeks.
Right.
So they're handling it.
Yeah,
now,
there is a commission.
There's a commission.
Right.
So when you propose that I come on your show, you wanted to talk about the midterm election. All of a sudden, this has devolved into talking about January 6th. I'm happy to talk about January 6th. I just find it kind of a waste of time when we have a congressional committee. Anyone can watch the televised hearings. Anyone can see what's going on with the congressional committee. But yet polling, which I'm talking about, midterm polling, January 6th does not even, it's not even on the radar.
Okay, well, I would respectfully disagree with you. I think January 6th is on the radar. Millions and millions of people have watched it.
It's on your radar, but it's not on the respondents that have been polled.
Not on election deniers
and the midterm election.
Not when
we can talk about election deniers. I watched Al Gore deny the election.
No, he didn't. Hold on a second. Are you now conflating? Hold on. You are conflating Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton, with all due respect, Hillary Clinton conceded the night of the election. Al Gore conceded. How can you compare the two between Hillary Clinton and Al Gore?
Sure, they conceded, but for the next 4 years...
Trump hasn't even conceded now. He hasn't conceded now. He refuses to concede.
For the next 4 years, from 2016 to 2020, we heard that Russians interfered in the election.
Which they did.
Which we heard about Macedonian bot farmers. There was
You just compared Al Gore being an election denier to Donald Trump. How can I take you seriously when you make...
No,
I don't know how you can make
how I can take you seriously when you won't let me finish a point.
You filled in for Wayne Allen Root, right? You filled in for Wayne Allen Root. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
The guy who said that Muslims, speaking of not taking people seriously, the guy who claimed that Muslims were responsible for October 1, that millions of people have died from taking the vaccines, and that he was solely responsible mainly for Donald Trump being reelected. And you want to say you can't take me seriously? This is a guy who compared calling somebody the N-word to calling somebody old. And you're saying, and you filled in for that guy. Should people take Wayne Allen Root seriously?
I filled in for Wayne many of times.
Right. He also, do you take him seriously? The guy that, by the way, got from the attorney.
Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't.
Sometimes you take him seriously.
I agree with everybody 100% of the time.
Got you. Okay, well, I'm just saying you don't take me seriously. I'm a pretty honest guy. I'm sorry.
No, it's hard for me to take you seriously when you invited me to come on and talk about the midterms, and all of a sudden this has devolved into rehashing the past of January 6th. I'm happy to talk about it. I'm just surprised that we've all of a sudden veered off into a topic that is not even polling. Like I'm saying, the midterm elections, when you look at the polls, January 6th does not even come up on the polls.
I don't know who you're polling.
Blacks that are polled, or Latinos that are polled, or whites that are polled, or women that are polled. They're not even talking about January 6th. But if you want to talk about January 6th for the next however long, I'm happy to do so.
No, I was just surprised about some of your answers and putting blame on.
I'm surprised by you, but I'm not shouting over you. So
okay, well, the way I usually conduct interviews is I absolutely will give somebody the time. I think I've given you enough time to answer questions. But when you say something that is just factually inaccurate, that's when I interject.
Conceding an election is a little bit different than denying the election.
Well, you said Ocasio-Cortez.
The election deniers, which is what this was about. Hillary Clinton denied the results of the 2016 election, even though she conceded. What happened during the 4 years between 2016 and 2020 is we heard how the 2016 election was stolen. I mean, you can't deny that. That was all over the headlines in the mainstream media.
You are comparing. You are comparing. That, I guess that's my issue. You're comparing Hillary Clinton and election denying to Donald Trump.
Yes.
That's what you're doing.
They both have denied the election results, even though one has not.
Well, that's not true. Hillary Clinton has said time and time again that she lost the election. She's done a ton of interviews since then, and she has not said she won the 2016 election. I don't know.
She continually questions the results of the 2016 election. We witnessed that for 4 years. I have the headlines to prove it.
She continually, especially recently, has always admitted that she lost, and she did not incite an insurrection. Donald Trump to this day says that Democrats cheated. Hillary didn't say Republicans cheated, and she won the election in a landslide. With all due respect, there is no comparison or analogy between election denying Hillary Clinton, Stacey Abrams, and Donald Trump. There wasn't an insurrection. You don't have candidates, Democrats that ran that said Republicans are stealing elections, and if I lose, I'm not willing to concede. That's exactly what Republicans are doing right now. But hey, it's a good debate. I appreciate you coming on, Megan. You're welcome back anytime. You're welcome to come in studio anytime, and maybe that would be easier if we did it that way. But I do appreciate your time and NevadaGlobe.com, and I appreciate you coming on. Thank you very much.
Well, when I'm in Vegas, I'd be happy to come in studio. Thank you so much.